Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. I just came back from a little surf trip along the west coast of Sweden, and I thought now that I landed back in the campsite where I have my camper van and I have some plug-in power that I can use, it's finally time to get started with the Inspiron 15 gaming video. So in this video we'll look at a few different use cases. We'll look at the machine just as it is with an external mouse. We'll look at it for Quad HD gaming in my office with the Quad HD screen I have there. And then we'll look at it for 144 Hz gaming in my home setup where I have a USB-C to DisplayPort cable that is able to drive the screen at 144 Hz with 144 frames with that setup. So let's dive right into it and see what we can do. Alright, let's have a look at some games. But to preface this video, I just want to say that this computer, my Dell Inspiron 7000, has been upgraded to have 16 GB RAM running in dual channel. This will affect the performance of the games, but I'm not going to reset it to the regular one. So we're going to have to go with the 16 GB in dual channel. Also, I have installed an extra SSD of 2 TB, which is perfect for gaming. At the moment I have installed Overwatch, Cuphead, Divinity Original Sin 2, Doom, Watch Dogs 2, The Witcher and Wolfenstein. And I still have 1.5 TB space left on that storage SSD. All the games here we will run with an undervolt of 140 millivolts, as I have shown in my undervolting video. And I will also run it with the turbo boost disabled for the CPU. The reason for that is with the CPU enabled, it immediately goes up to 100 degrees and it's just gonna throttle. So there's really no point in trying to play games when the CPU is just constantly throttling. So we're sticking with those settings. I will try the 3 different games of Overwatch, Divinity Original Sin 2, and The Witcher 3, just to give you like one more fast-paced FPS game, one more scene from above strategy game, and then one AAA really heavy graphic intense RPG game. When I'm playing, I'm gonna be having the following applications started, just so you know exactly what kind of setup we're dealing with here. Throttle stop to enable undervolt and disable turbo boost. Core temp, because that's the app I've been using in my other videos to check the maximum temperature of the CPU cores. We are also going to run MSI Afterburner together with the Riva Tuner statistics so that we can get on-screen stats in all the different games that we're going to play, and also get the nice curves here so we can have a look at how the temperature was varying, how the frame rate was varying, and how the usage of GPU and CPU etc. was varying. I will also be filming this whole review in 60 frames per second, so it's gonna be possible to see the 60 frames going out through the 60 Hz screens, both in this part where I'm recording the laptop screen and also with the Quad HD screen. But when it comes to the 144 Hz screen, you're not gonna be able to see all the 144 frames. But of course we can have a look at how many frames the graphic card is able to push out, but you're not going to be able to see them in the video. But that's just how camera technique works. But now let's get into the first game. In Overwatch we're playing with the following settings: Ultra, and then everything else set to whatever the game selected it to when I selected Ultra graphics settings. Let's see how it plays. An extremely bad game has finally ended. In core temperature, we can see that we had a maximum of 85, 83 and 84 degrees on the CPU. Let's look in MSI Afterburner. We can see that we were pretty much around 77, 78 degrees. Sometimes we were down to 76. At GPU usage, we were at 98, sometimes a little bit below, 93. GPU memory usage is around 1200, 1300 megabytes. GPU memory usage is around 1200 to 1300 megabytes out of the 4000 megabytes that are available. CPU temperature, we can see here again, the maximum was at 86 degrees, but most of the time we were around 82, 83 degrees. CPU usage, we were hovering between 50 and 65%, with a maximum of 86%. RAM usage, we were at a maximum of 8364 megabytes. So then it's easy to understand that Overwatch consumes quite a bit of RAM, and that we're going to be limited if we have only 8 gigabytes of RAM. And with the frame rates, let's see how that varied. We were at anything between 113, sometimes around 90, but most of the time around 110 to 120. While we are loading up the second game, Divinity Original Sin 2, I just wanted to mention a few things about the experience of gaming on this laptop without using any external accessories, except of course I'm using an external mouse because gaming on a trackpad is not a very enjoyable experience. So for that I'm using my MX Master 2S. I know a lot of people is gonna ask about the keyboard for gaming, and for me the three most important things when it comes to the keyboard is: does the keyboard get hot while you're gaming? The quick answer to that is that while I keep on these settings with Turbo Boost turned off, so I keep the CPU temperature at about 80 to 85 degrees and the GPU temperature at about 75 degrees, the keyboard is not hot while using those settings. It's completely fine to play and use the WASD keys with those settings. It doesn't get hot to the touch. Here are the graphics settings that we're gonna play the game with. Ultra. We have model quality on high, texture quality high, texture filtering at 16 times, lighting quality at high, shadows and light shadows, and they are on high. We have anti-aliasing on 1 time. We have all these options enabled. For some reason, the game seems to lock in at 60 frames per second, even though I set this slider to not cap the game. I'm not sure why that is happening.
There's something to these doors I'm not seeing. But what?
The door seems like any door, at least at first. Then you notice it's unblemished wood. There is no knot, no scratch, no dent to detract from its apparent perfection. The wood groans and creaks. For a moment, you swear a face appears in the wood. A face tortured and tormented, a six-sided shape carved upon its forehead. The face vanishes. The anguished face appears, then vanishes. The door remains unmarked. The thud of your fist upon the wood resonates deeper than you'd expected it to. It turns into what sounds like a moan, then echoes away into silence.
Whatever type of companion you need, I can provide.
Alright, we need to get past these doors in some way, but always with these quests it's super hard to know what we're actually supposed to do.
You can put a price on the warriors I have for hire, but you can't put a price on the glory they'll win.
Beast, you made it. Good. We'll need all the help we can get. We have to get this ship sailing, or we're done.
It's good to be on the open seas again. Set sail for Driftwood, I reckon. From there, we can track down my old pack and find out who's behind the contracts to kill Godwoken. Yes, but if he's Godwoken like us, maybe for now, just maybe, it's good fortune that he's still breathing. The Lone Wolves were tasked with killing Godwoken.
Ivan's lips curve in a sly smile.
No, fear not, but it tickles me no end that you're sharp enough to consider that a possibility. So, hand on my heart, we're in it together. What do you say? It does, doesn't it? Me too. A god I don't believe in told me things about myself I don't believe. Yeah. Harder to maintain skepticism then, all right. Whatever we believe, we still need to live in the here and now. So, let's get back to work. Me too. Best damn friend a man could have.
He whistles, and the shaggy wolf appears by his side, panting in that way that makes wolves look like they're laughing.
Wouldn't try that if I were you. He don't take kindly to strangers. Afrit's been howling at my side a long time now. Good old boy appears any time I use Source. You should have seen him rampage on the day the Magisters collared me. If you'd seen that, you'd know to keep your fingers as far from his jaws as you could. Lonely? I wouldn't think so.
He pauses, reddening slightly as he looks at you curiously.
Unless, wait. What did you mean exactly?
Ivan blushes fiercely and looks at the distant horizon, scuffing his boot awkwardly on the ground.
Let's talk about that another time. A time that's not, now.
As he turns away in an uncharacteristically clumsy manner, you see that his eyes are bright, and the hint of a smile.
There's got to be some clue.
We have to find a way to get this ship moving.
Void Slayer, Worm Killer, Godwoken. You have many names. Let's add ship's captain to the list once we get this thing moving, shall we? Driftwood, of course. Little fishing village. Not very welcoming, but you'll brighten it up, I'm sure. Got family near there. Not the adventuring types. Meister Siever's there too. My leader. She held the Seekers together when we had every reason to fall apart. Think of her as a teacher. The powers of the Seven stir in you. She'll reveal them to you. Show you how to manipulate them. I won't let the Fallen be forgotten. To think that whelp spawned. He's down there now, guarded. Amazing to think those of us in the Order, other Godwoken. We weren't the only ones who. We found Godwoken. But let's leave the past in the past and keep Lucian close, Godwoken.
Getting it done, come hell or high water. Likely both, eh?
Ah, there's the pure breed now. This is Dallas's ship, but she can't have been the only one who could get it moving. It'd be too risky, and Dallas is anything but careless. There's a way to move this ship on board, I'm sure of it. The figurehead has certainly caused a commotion lately, but then again, so have the doors downstairs. Everywhere you look, a hunk of wood looking to incinerate, or you'd be surprised. A ship like this holds many secrets. Hopefully you can discover some these Seekers might have missed. Dying to hear them, pure breed. Meister Siever is one of a rare breed. She'd do anything in the name of a cause, and her cause happens to be you. She's desperate to meet. We'd better not leave her waiting. She's the founder of these Seekers, and she's powerful. That means something when I say it. Your kind can reach astounding heights. Meister Siever can help you. A place called Driftwood. Host a putrid fish. You'll probably find it quite comfortable.
Alright, we have been in Divinity Original Sin 2 for about 15 minutes. And we have CPU core stats of a maximum 80 degrees, which I find to be really good. Let's have a look in MSI Afterburner. We were at a GPU temperature between 62 and 75 degrees. We were at GPU usage between about 60 and 97-98%. We were using 1300 megabytes memory as the most and 885 megabytes minimum. We were using a maximum of 62% of the CPU. We were using between 7344 megabytes and 7708 megabytes of RAM. And our frame rate was locked in at 60 FPS, and even though I tried to change it in the game, I couldn't get it to change for some reason. We have now moved on to the uber classic AAA title of Witcher 3 that I have actually never played before, so this is going to be a premiere for me and have a look at this game finally. A lot of people have recommended it to me, so I'm quite stoked to try it out and see how it plays. We're setting the settings to Ultra, and then we're gonna play with the settings exactly as the game selects them when you select the Ultra preset. Now I think the GPU is getting a bit challenged, because now we are at 32 FPS. Which actually gives a quite fancy cinematic look to the movies right here.
gold clashes with my complexion. You should know that.
See, I thought Siri could stand to wait a little longer.
It's uninstructive, not to mention unreasonable.
I don't want to be reasonable.
Aha, so that's the way the wind blows. Go and train with her, then come back. It'll give me a chance to put my face on.
Of all the women I've known, you're the only one who does that before.
You've known many.
What's it matter? Only ever thought of you. Witcher's fast asleep. Ciri's disappeared somewhere, of course. Guess she prefers practice to theory.
What?
Time to wake up, Master. These lessons so bored.
Damn it. I've been taking notes on
Making her slog through that.
John of Bruges lacks flip. She's tackling the pen. How many times? Bring her, young.
Don't get mad at her.
Why the hell not? The whippersnapper refuses to...
You like that about her.
Fine. Killing monsters is not something to be taken lightly. Us.
Wrong. Now I see why you were so eager to practice. Strike. You're not in a circus, pirouette. What did I tell you about breathing? Through your mouth, in rhythm with your steps. Siri, cut it out. I win.
Your legs are longer. I'll show you.
Anything to say for yourself, young lady?
Alright, I have now been playing Witcher 3 for about 15 minutes, and let's have a look at the stats. In CPU core, we are at 83 degrees maximum, and we are at 81 degrees on core number 2 and core number 3. Let's look in MSI Afterburner. GPU temperature is at a minimum of 51 and a maximum of 75 degrees, pretty much all the time at 74 degrees. GPU usage, which was at 100% all the time. GPU memory usage was around 1500 to 1750. CPU temperature, as we saw before, was up to 83 degrees. CPU usage was up to about 83%, but as you can see, it's mainly lower than that, and it just bursts up to that high usage sometimes. RAM usage was around 7600 megabytes for most of the time, and frames per second was varying between 10 and 60, but as you can see here, like most of the time we were hovering between 35 and 45 FPS. So sometimes we were hitting 60, but it's definitely not consistent 60 FPS in Ultra on Witcher 3. That's it for the playtesting on the actual unit itself. If you have any other questions about playing games on it just like this, please let me know in the comments. And now we're gonna move on to the Quad HD gaming part. We are now at the second setup where we're gonna try some Quad HD gaming. And I've set up the computer right here, hooked it up via HDMI to my Quad HD 27-inch Dell monitor, and I'm gonna be playing with external mouse and keyboard. They are both wireless Bluetooth, so it's not the ultimate gaming setup. It's more of an office environment setup where you are gonna be able to do some gaming when you feel that you need to relax from work a little bit. Let's have a look at how it plays. When getting into Overwatch, we need to make sure to change the resolution up to Quad HD, 60 Hz, keeping the settings on Ultra, and then we have the frame rate is uncapped, so we're gonna see where it caps itself. Alright, let's try a game. From being in skirmish, I can tell that there's no problem to be above 60 frames per second. I can also tell that this screen is not perfect for gaming, because when I move back and forth like this, you can see there's some tearing happening. Yeah, it's not perfect for gaming. This is more of an office screen for sure. Just gonna play around with a few heroes here, and then we're gonna look at the stats in MSI Afterburner. Where is that Pharah? Alright, let's look at the stats. We have a maximum of 82 degrees on the CPU. A maximum of 75 degrees on the GPU. A maximum of 100% GPU usage. We used up to 1639 megabytes of GPU memory, which is considerably more than when we were playing in Full HD. We used up to 100% CPU, but most of the time while we were playing, we were around 40 to 50%. We used a maximum of 8460 megabyte RAM, and most of the time we were around 8 gigabytes RAM usage. We had a maximum frame rate of 103 FPS, but most of the time we were hovering between 65 and 80 FPS. Let's try out Divinity and see if we can get this to run at 60 FPS in Quad HD. I would be surprised if that is possible, but let's give it a go.
Seems you're a born survivor, Sabine. Let's hope we can get this ship moving, so your efforts
Maybe there's something with our tips. We can't get this ship moving, Gone Woken. With every free hand looking into it. Help, if you can. Something around here. Something we're missing.
The graphics are truly stunning though. Have a look at those waves. That's beautiful. And just to make sure, we are playing it in Quad HD and we haven't got any cap and we're still in ultra settings.
Be careful around the figurehead, Godwoken. We can't afford them. Terse endeavors. Pray to you for my seeker brethren. Show us.
Alright, that's a few minutes of Divinity Original Sin gameplay. Let's have a look at the stats. We maxed out at 80 degrees Celsius on the CPU. We were on a GPU temperature on about 73, 74, which seems to be where you're at almost all of the time. 100% of the GPU, 1300 megabytes GPU memory. We had a CPU temperature between 58 and 79. We had CPU usage up to 80%. We were using up to 6889 megabytes of RAM, and we were most of the time around 6000 megabytes. And the frame rate was maxing out at 61 FPS. Most of the time we were between 45 and 55. And then after a while, we actually stabilized around 60 FPS. But I think that was when I was in that darker room inside the boat, when there was less happening with the waves and stuff around. So that's probably why we raised the frame rate around that point. Finally, it's time for the holy grail. Witcher 3 in Quad HD resolution. How will this computer fare when it comes to pushing out one of the most demanding games available in Quad HD resolution? It's going to be very interesting to see. Raising it to Quad HD, and we're keeping ultra settings.
Knowledge counts as much as your silver sword. At the very least, you want to be able to tell a ghoul from an owl.
By markings, like unto the Panthera tigris that in Zeracania dwells, and by the sickly paleness of its visage.
So you did, brave chap. Still, you should have asked if...
But you were asleep, Uncle Vesemir.
So you did the reading. Why not admit it right off?
Never pounce on an advantage as soon as it appears. Wait till it stands to have maximum effect. Uncle Vesemir's words.
What blazes it all?
Slice your jugular.
Stop showing off your... What blazes are you doing? Stop showing off your... Call that a strong
Position, Siri. Footwork. Remember. Pretend now, live later. Riposte! Strike! Counter-strike! Now, Yarley, bring the day to a close. We'll go over a few feature signs. Let's start with... Siri, Gwen is sometimes called the Witcher's Shield. Now watch carefully to see Ask Igni, Geralt. I want to see sparks fly.
Alright, after a few minutes of gameplay in Witcher 3 in Quad HD, I'm surprised it worked that well. It was actually playable, and I thought it would definitely not be playable. Let's watch our CPU core. That was at a maximum of 80 degrees. Our GPU temperature was around 74-75 degrees, as it's usually. GPU usage was fixed at 100%. We used 1,800 megabytes of GPU memory. We used around 25 to 30% CPU for most of the time. So this is a very GPU intense game apparently. We used 7,200 megabytes of RAM at the most, and we were around 7,000 most of the time while playing. We were between 25 and 33 FPS in the actual gameplay, and the maximum 60 FPS was just when we were in the menu there in the very beginning. I have to say that is a very good score, and I'm super happy that this computer games so well even with these heavy titles. A lot of people probably want to know whether you can game when you run a lower wattage USB-C adapter, and I just tried a gaming session of about 30 minutes on this 90 watt USB-C charger that I recently got for the laptop, and I can happily conclude that it was actually charging the computer while I was gaming, but that only happened on the undervolt and turbo boost off settings. So if I didn't undervolt and if I turned turbo boost on, the battery was slowly depleted. So keep that in mind. If you're playing in like regular out-of-the-box settings, you're gonna deplete the battery if you plug in a 90 watt charger, and you're probably gonna need the 130 watt original charger to be able to game. In this last setup, I'm using the computer with the USB-C to DisplayPort cable connected to my 144 Hz monitor. I have experimented quite a bit with this setup to make it run at an as high frame rate as possible, and I come to the conclusion that you basically have to set the game down to low settings, the standard low settings, and we're gonna try the game here and see how many FPS it produces during this time. Let's have a look at the stats. After about 10 minutes of gaming, we have had a max temperature on the CPU of 84 degrees and a max temperature on the GPU of 75 degrees. We have used 87% of the GPU, 1,330 megabytes of the GPU memory, and usually we were around 75% usage of the CPU. We used 9 gigabytes of RAM, and our frame rate was starting out at around 150, 160, and then it stabilized hovering between 130 and 140, and then lowered after a while and was more at around 120, sometimes up to 130. So that might be because of the processor not being able to turbo. It might be because of temperatures. I'm actually not sure why that is. But we're consistently above 120 FPS, while this is on low graphics. So it's a little bit disappointing even, since it could run that well on ultra graphics. But there seems to be something going on when I connect with this DisplayPort to this 144 Hz screen. It definitely gives me lower than expected frame rates with this setup. Let's try Divinity and see if we can get this up to 144 Hz by lowering the graphics settings. I lowered the settings to low, and while being inside the ship here, we achieve an easy 130 to 140 FPS. But now with this heavier graphics element, with this ocean here, it's not keeping up. It's on 80 to 83, sometimes up to 90. So in this kind of situation, you're definitely not hitting 144 frames. There's not really a reason to hit 144 frames in a game like this, but I'm mostly just playing around to see what we can achieve. Let's try the game then on the very low settings, and then we'll see if we can reach something higher. So there's a little bit of difference. We reach above 100 frames per second most of the time. But if we have more of this ocean in the screen, we can still stay around 100 frames per second. Last but not least, I was going to show off if we could play The Witcher on those. Last but not least, I was going to do the grand finale of Witcher and try to get that up to 144 frames per second. But that doesn't seem to be an option, as the game is locked in at 60 FPS, and it doesn't matter if I turn VSync on or off. I have never really played Witcher 3 before this review, so if there's any way to try this, you can just let me know in the comments, and I will do a check and I will add that into the description later on, how it plays if you can push it up to a higher frames per second. But in the meantime, let's just check how it plays on the ultra settings. Ultra settings are definitely not that enjoyable, so I'm just gonna set it down to high settings and see how that plays. So now in high settings we achieve about 50 to 52 FPS in The Witcher, which I find to be very playable. So I think high settings is the way to go in this game. The max temperature of the CPU was 81 degrees. We have max temperature on the GPU is 74 degrees. We have a GPU usage that is about 96% most of the time while playing. We use 1500 megabytes as max of the GPU memory. We use about 40 to 50% of the CPU. We use 7 gigabytes RAM, and we have a consistent frame rate above 50 FPS. But here, when we're playing Ultra, we were rather around 30 to 40, which was not a very enjoyable experience. I really hope you enjoyed this gaming review of the Dell Inspiron 15-7000. It took quite a long time to produce because of all the videos I have to shoot and edit, so that's why it took a little longer to release than what I had originally planned. If there's anything else you want me to do about the Dell Inspiron 15-7000, just let me know in the comments, and make sure to follow the channel so you can get my videos around tech, travel and personal development stuff. I try to release them as regularly as possible. Thank you for watching the video and have a very nice day. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.